Time. It's a dimension of reality. It's fundamental to every human experience. To better understand our experience of time, today I'm going to use the experiences of war survivors to take you just below the surface of consciousness, where we'll uncover processes our minds use to perceive time. But first, I'm going to head inside because it's just about to rain. Here we are, that's better. By the end of this video, you will be able to identify cognitive processes hidden in plain sight. Cognitive processes that give life to both our sense of time and who we are. War is awful, but because war is so extreme, it's fantastic to think about time with. War forces to the surface qualities of time already within us that most of us never think about. War upends assumptions about time. Peace researcher John Paul Lederach argues war does two things to a survivor's sense of time. First, war seems recent, even when it happened decades ago. In other words, the violent past is alive. Second, the violent past is in front. I did my anthropology PhD research in Tajikistan, which had a civil war in the 1990s. Lederach is right. In Tajikistan, it is widespread for the civil war to seem alive and in front to those who lived through it. For instance, a combatant describing a battle from 20 years prior told me, "When I think about the war, it seems like it all happened yesterday. When we talk about wartime, everything comes to my mind, in front of my mind." After that same battle, 3 civilians risked their own lives to collect the bodies of 25 combatants. Today, one of those civilians is an old man. Recalling that experience, he said, "Every minute is present in front of my eyes. I see what happened." He added, "Sometimes I see one of the dead's living relatives, and as soon as I see them, the memory of that dead person comes to my mind." A female Civil War survivor said, "When someone experiences war in their life, war stays with them for their whole life. The war doesn't go away or get lost." The past being alive and in front goes against the grain of modern culture. Are these folks traumatized? Trauma does affect experiences of time, but war survivors without mental disorders place the past in front too. Very few, if any, of the survivors I spoke to were traumatized. Most people are resilient. You don't have to be traumatized to be victimized by war. Let's not pathologize what is often a healthy human reaction to the horrors of mass violence. So, why is the past alive and in front? The answer is because wartime events are important. The past is in front because survivors focus their attention on it. Focusing on the past is what locates it in front. That's true of all kinds of past events, not just war. War just makes it easier to notice. Cognitive scientist Daniel Casasanto shows people locate the past in front when their cultures are oriented toward the past. Becoming old can do the same because older people are more likely to reminisce about their past. Clearly, there is nothing abnormal about the past being in front, but I'm guessing some folks listening to this are uncomfortable with the idea of keeping the wartime past alive. Such apprehension is understandable. Being stuck in the violent past is dangerous, but not remembering the violent past is just as destructive. Lederach argues peace builders should dump the idea of forgive and forget, and instead think of remember and change. Lederach is again correct. The female war survivor I mentioned earlier, she was in the Tajik city of Horog in 2012 when a battle occurred between the national government and local men. About 50 died. As soon as the battle started, her 20-year-old memories of the Civil War were heightened with a new sense of urgency. She and other women were prompted by their wartime memories to form a group of peacemakers. They hit the streets to protest the violence. As seen here, they demanded the violence stop, And thanks to them and some others working behind the scenes, the fighting did stop after just one day. So, war makes it easy to see the past as being in front. War also tells us something more about time. It tells us the human mind is fully capable of thinking one way about time and then expressing that same thought very differently in language. Let me explain. Let's return to the idea that the past is in front. Time metaphors in most languages locate the past behind. Like the metaphor, we've put that behind us. But Casasanto points out such metaphors do not lock us into thinking the past is behind. War shows that we can experience and think about the past as being in front, even though our language metaphors express the opposite. How we cognitively process time can be the reverse of how we express those same thoughts in speech. Let's change gears a little. Let's take a moment to think about the term time. What does it mean? What we call time mostly has three meanings. First, how long something takes. Second, the sequence in which things happen, before and after, earlier and later. And third, the past, present, and future. These three meanings are so different, it's curious we use the same term for all three. But alas, this is not a talk about the limits of Western philosophy. Instead, let's think about our mind's eye. The imagery generated by our mind's eye is fundamental to how we comprehend key aspects of time. Here's how. When we use our mind's eye to think about the past and the future, we take one of two visual perspectives. To explain, I'm going to use the research of cognitive scientists Rafael Nunez and Kenzie Cooper-Ryder. The first visual perspective is that of looking out through our own eyes. Here I'm using the camera to simulate what I see in front of me. The second visual perspective uses an external point of view, so we see ourselves in the scene. The external view might be from the angle you see now, or from a different angle. It doesn't really matter. The main point is that we use our mind's eye to locate ourselves in the scene. Let me show you how the two visual perspectives map onto thinking about past and future. Let's start with two examples of looking through our own eyes. As you listen, observe where the sense of now is located. We've put those difficulties behind us. You're racing through your meal. Did you see that? The sense of now is located with the speaker as the speaker moves through the landscape. This diagram illustrates the same thing. The red arrow indicates the direction of looking through our own eyes. The diagram locates the past and future as we do with English language time metaphors. Remember, how we locate the past in thought can be the reverse of these metaphors. With expressions like, we've put those difficulties behind us, we move through the landscape, as we saw a few moments ago. But consider a metaphor like, the future is becoming brighter. We are metaphorically in one place, looking through our own eyes as time moves through the landscape toward us. In this part of the video, my cat represents the future coming toward us. Again, the sense of now is with the speaker. Let's switch to the external visual perspective. The sense of now is no longer going to be right alongside the speaker. Instead, it's going to be much more diffuse. With the external perspective, the sense of past and future is often far more expansive too. War made me the man I am today. This diagram illustrates that same external perspective. You're free to cast your eye on the entire scene, from past to present to future. In this example, the wartime past and the man one is today are equally visible and equally important. I suppose if we used these two visual perspectives only to think about time, most people would regard them as a mere curiosity. However, These same two visual perspectives are used when thinking about ourselves too. That's what makes visual perspective so potent. When we think about ourselves or something we've done or imagined doing, we use the same two visual perspectives, looking out our own eyes or looking at ourselves from an external perspective. Social psychologists Lisa Libby and Richard Ibach point out that when we look out our own eyes, we think about an event's concrete details. The event is defined by the experience of these concrete details. By contrast, when we look from an external perspective, we focus on the meaning the event has for our broader life and for society. And here's what's amazing. We can look at the same event from either perspective, switching between them at will. Which visual perspective we use determines what we think of when we think about the event. For example, a man told me about preparing the body of his friend for burial. His friend had been tortured by the Tajik security services and died soon afterward. When the man described it to me, he did so as if he were looking through his own eyes, remembering himself in the room in which he washed his friend's body. He talked about the blood leaking out from the swollen, mangled body, and the feel on his hands of the body's many lacerations and broken bones. Just as Libby and Ibach argue, he focused on his experience of the concrete details. When I asked him to use the external perspective so he could see himself in the scene, he exclaimed, "You shout! Nobody helps! Who will help in Tajikistan? Who will they go to? Who to talk to?" Suddenly, his focus shifted to Tajik society. He drew attention to the meaning of his friend's death. Pay attention to what each visual perspective did to his sense of time. When he was looking through his own eyes, the sense of now was tightly focused on his experience of washing the body. When he used the external perspective to direct his attention to society, the sense of now was transformed to become much more expansive and diffuse. This combination of time, self, and visual perspective is what I call the spatio-temporal self. It's a new paradigm with which to understand time and the self. The spatio-temporal self works through 4 levels of the self that emerged in evolution. It groups those 4 levels into 2 sets. The bottom set functions as one level analytically. So, the spatio-temporal self simply merges the bottom 3 levels into one. That gives us the minimal self and the narrative self. The minimal self is all about our experience of events. It's activated when we use our mind's eye to see through our own eyes. The narrative self is all about conception and meaning. It springs into action when we see ourselves from the external perspective. There's so much more to say, but I'm going to have to leave it here. More about how you can use the spatio-temporal self will need to wait for future videos. Until then, remember that just below the surface of consciousness there are cognitive processes humming away, hidden in plain sight. These processes are an alliance of time and self, brought together by the power of visual perspective. You can now identify them in yourself and in others. Ask others which visual perspective they're using when they recall something from the past or are imagining the future. Ask them to change visual perspective so they can see and experience the past and the future in a new light.